Sian, Sian, my dear, are you awake? The sun shone through the window, but not even that caused her to wake. She stirred from a wonderful dream about Iago and her dancing through unknown yet beautiful forest. She hadn't wanted that moment to end, allowing herself to be led by him in the clearing of a dense forest. The sun warmed her face and her body as the rays passed over her, the wind dancing through her wavy hair, and the loose portions of her hair that he had falling over his dangerously handsome face. The sound of the leaves crunching softly as they stepped on the ground. There had been the silence expected in a forest, besides the birds and the insects going about their daily tasks and their breathing. Finally, he just held her to him and rocked slowly from side to side, and she could feel his breath on her head and could hear his heart beat as she closed her eyes and felt him stroking her back as they held each other. She blinked as she awoke, then realized that someone was still at the door. It was Rose calling her. She thought that to be quite odd, but then she remembered that she had promised Alex that she would meet his parents that day. Yes, Rose, I'm awake. I'll be out in a minute. She looked at the time on the clock next to her bed as it read 7:45. She would have to teach Alex about the importance of sleep, she mumbled to herself. She heard Rose talk to someone in the passage and assumed that it was Alex. Getting up, she freshened herself, made up her bed, and folded Iago's coat, placing it beside her pillow. Smiling, she reminded herself that she would be seeing him that night, and warmth rose through her body in excitement. The smell of tea and toast hung in the air as she exited the room, and she found Alex speaking to Rose, chewing on a piece of jam toast as he did. They both smiled broadly at Sian when she entered, making her paranoid personality rather suspicious. "You came in quite late last night, my dear," Rose said, looking rather worried. Alex studied her for an answer too. "I had to take a walk to clear my head," Sian offered. "Oh, that is a perfectly acceptable excuse," Rose smiled. "Now how about some tea and toast?" Rose got up and started clearing the table. "Oh, some tea would be wonderful, thank you, Rose." She knew that she would need all the strength she would get from any source possible if Alex's parents were any bit as annoying as he was. Drinking the hot fluid as quickly as possible, she noticed that Alex was almost over-eager to get her out of the house. She stopped at the doorway. "Rose, may I speak to you for a moment in private, please? It is of the utmost importance," she added quickly, as she could see that Alex was about to say something. Rose ushered her into the office, a small room filled with books and ornaments, placed in an orderly manner. Yes, dear, you look perplexed." "I am. Tell me, what is the significance of a man bringing a girl home to his parents in this town?" "Well, to be honest, he's really interested in you and possibly wants to marry you." No. Sian felt faint. "I I have only been in this town for a few days and intend to leave as soon as my memory returns. That would be a problem, Rose pondered. And the other problem is that I found an engagement ring at the bottom of my bag, meaning that I had been engaged. Why was it at the bottom of your bag and not on your finger? I have no idea. The point is that the feeling of attraction is not mutual between Alex and me, and I have no idea how to get out of it without hurting his feelings. Does Alex know about the engagement ring? Yes, I told him yesterday. And he still insists on chasing you? Oh, and then there's that issue with you and the prince too. What issue? Nothing goes past old Rose, dear. I've seen the way that you two look at each other. It practically electrifies the air. To be honest, I visited him last night, as I told you. What I didn't tell you was that I stayed there for quite some time, and let's just say that you were right about my feelings of attraction for him. I have absolutely no interest in Alex, and he seems to be pushing for something, and frankly, it's scaring the heck out of me. So, Prince Iago and Alex are both very fond of you, Rose continued with her internal debate. Seems that way, doesn't it? Besides, Alex's fondness is bordering on harassment. What do I do, Rose? Both women deliberated for a while. Finally, Rose gently slapped Sian on the back. Well, may the best man win, I say. Go on, Alex and his family are waiting for you. Oh, no. Sian stepped out into the sunlight. Rose had obviously chosen not to take sides, and Sian completely understood. Rose had to face the people after she left, and making enemies wouldn't really be to her advantage. Even though it promised to be a beautiful day, she had a bad feeling about it. She really did not want to meet the parents of Alex, and every step that she took, she tried to think of some sort of excuse to get out of the situation. No valid excuse came to mind. She couldn't simply tell him that she didn't want to go with him and that she wanted to be with Iago instead, safely and deeply inside his residence, as that would severely hurt his feelings and make enemies of his parents and cause even more problems for Iago. She remembered the aggressive way that Alex responded to her just looking at Iago. She clearly felt what it was like to be between a rock and a hard place. Once again, she felt Alex reach for her arm and then drop his hand. She smiled inwardly. He wouldn't get the better of her, and he had realized that fact. She didn't need to pound him over the proverbial head anymore, it seemed. Let's just get this encounter over with, she thought. The sooner it was done, the sooner she could see Iago. They continued on in silence, and on reaching the door of his parents' house, she let out a deep and heavy sigh. If he heard it, he didn't respond to it at all. Diplomacy was the key to this visit. She didn't want to leave as enemies, as only goodness knew how long it would take her to get her memory back. Alex opened the door for her and stood aside, waiting for her to enter, which cautiously and tentatively she did. "Good morning, my dear," the voice startled her. A busty, plump woman in a uniformed blue dress met her inside the door. Her light brown hair was plaited behind her head and rested on her shoulder. On her face, Sian could see utmost excitement and anticipation. Eyes wide and shining, face lustrous, cheeks rosy, and smile threatening to outdo the strength of the sun. Behind her stood a slender man with a tailored moustache, dark, playful eyes, and a matching blue suit. His sheepish grin made it obvious to Sian, who wore the proverbial pants in that household. Sian shivered in nervousness. "Good morning," came her meek reply. "Oh, goodness, where are my manners? I'm Lisa, Alex's mother, and this is Giles, his father." She shook hands diplomatically with the firmest grasp that she could fathom and looked at them directly in their eyes. She would pretend that this was a business meeting, and she was sure to the Hughes that this was. "Please sit, my dear. I want to hear all about you. Oh, but first, Alex tells me that you don't eat breakfast in the morning, so to keep your energy up, I've baked a wonderful apple pie, the best in the entire world, or so the rest of the town tells me." She giggled at her own joke, making Sian sigh inwardly. This was going to be a rather long meeting, and she could see no way that she could speed it up, as it seemed as though Lisa was particularly talkative. "Alex, go and get her a slice," she said, and smiled even more broadly when Alex looked at Sian and blushed. Sian was about to object, but Lisa insisted, so she gave in. Best to entertain their hospitality, she thought. "So, Alex tells me that you have no idea who you are," Lisa began. "What else has your darling Alex told you?" she wanted to say, but calmly smiled and reminded herself of a promise to be diplomatic. "Well, I wouldn't exactly say that, Mrs. Hughes," she started. "Oh, please, call me Lisa." As you wish. I wouldn't exactly say that. I know who I am. What I don't know is where I've come from and how exactly I got here, that's all." "And you said that you drove here?" "That is correct." "You drove to our town on a road?" "A gravel road, to be precise, similar to the road that you have inside your town." Lisa and Giles looked at each other and giggled. "I need to tell you, that is highly impossible." Yes, Alex has already enlightened me to that fact. I do, however, think that I know what I saw, and the suspension damage on my car tells me that it was not merely a figment of my imagination." Lisa and Giles looked at each other and winked, a sign to entertain her fantasies. "Oh, I see. So, how long are you planning to stay at our town?" Just until my memory comes back, and then I guess I'll be off again to my old life." "Oh, but that's not possible, my dear. You have to stay here when you and Alex are married. It's the law of the town, I'm afraid." Sian stood up, speechless, her trembling body threatening to prevent her from moving without falling over. She had known that the visit to the Hughes would have been a terrible mistake, and she felt the pit in her stomach, which made her want to scream 1,000 screams. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Hughes. I believe there have been some misunderstandings in the communications between your son and me. I have no interest in marriage to anyone at the moment, nor will I be pressured into any situation where wedlock is decided. I thank you for your hospitality, but I bid you a good morning." Sian ran outside, the glare of the sun blinding her for a brief moment. Disorientated, she stood in the road for a few moments, and then found herself running towards the garden. It was the only place she could think of that offered her some form of solitude. She fought not to scream and ended up hyperventilating with tears running down her face. She had to get out of this nightmare and return to her former life, whatever and wherever it was. Collapsing on a nearby bench in the shade, she calmed down as she listened to the birds chirping and the insects buzzing, accompanied by the rustling of leaves in the trees overhead. Holding her hands in her head, she let out a sob. She had stepped into a nightmare and just wanted it to be over. Tears falling to the ground. As she held her head in her hands, she tried so hard to stop, but hopelessness just overtook her, and she continued to drench the ground with her tears. Suddenly, she felt a hand stroke her hair softly. Crying has never solved any situation. It just causes headaches. Wiping her face as best she could, she stood up rapidly and faced Iago. It's a pity you should see me like this. It's a pity you should be like this in the first place. Come with me. I'll help you escape for now, and hopefully give you courage to face what's upsetting you so much. Sian graciously took his hand and allowed herself to be led to his house. They walked in a comfortable silence, and he opened the door without breaking contact with her. Once inside, he drew her towards him and held her tightly, letting her cry her heart out. "Thank you," she sighed, once she had her breath back. "I hope to do the same for you one day." "You already have. You just don't know it yet." Taking a deep breath, taking in his scent, and taking all her strength to let go, she released him and stood, looking into his deep, deep eyes. She smiled as she wiped the tears from her face, and he kissed her forehead. Taking her hand, he led her to a chair and planted himself beside her. "Now, tell me what's upsetting you so much." She looked for sarcasm in his face, but he was genuine in his interest, so she told him of Alex and their encounter with his family. "I see. Well, that boy has been looking for a wife for some time, and you seem to be the one in his eyes. He shouldn't have tried to force you, but that's all he knows, so forgive him. He's from a time where such practices were normal. He's my age, and such practices deserve a punch in the face." "Sure seems that way, doesn't it? He's a bit older than you, Sian. He just carries his age well." Sian frowned, pondering, not making sense out of Iago's words. "Good genes, I suspect," she said, trying to probe for more information. Iago simply smiled. "Have you told him of your disinterest?" "I have, believe it or not. A year ago, I wouldn't have had the heart to, and would have been happy in the fact that someone found me attractive. But I have told him of my disinterest in him. He's a good man, but he's not right for me. I've also told him that I was engaged, and that I found an engagement ring in the bottom of my bag, and he still doesn't want to leave me alone." "You were engaged?" "Seems that way, but what I can't work out is what it was doing in the bottom of my bag and not on my finger." Iago deliberated for some time. She didn't mind as long as she could just be close to him and watch him. She would be content for all eternity. After some time, he nodded his head slightly and looked at her. Okay, well, this is what you should do. As much as you may not want to, go back to Alex and his family today and speak about what happened. Sian looked at him, dread apparent in her eyes. Life is too short to have misunderstandings of this petty nature, although I'm sure that the matter does not seem petty to you at this moment. He smiled at her and stroked her face. Don't worry. Everything will be all right. And when the encounter is over, you can come here. I'll contact Rose and let her know that you will be with me all evening. I'm sure she'll understand. Sian's dread disappeared immediately. She would love to spend an evening with him. In fact, she would love to spend an eternity with him. I'm sure she would understand, and I graciously accept your hospitality. No need to be formal, my Sian. As long as you're here, I'm happy. She rose and hugged him again, took a deep breath in, and after squeezing his hands and absorbing his smile for strength, walked out and readied herself for the encounter to follow.